Hey everyone, it's Army Gaming, welcome back to the channel and welcome to Monster Legends. Are you ready to find out who is the best taunt monster in the game? Now, to be clear, I am not talking about all of the tanks in the game, I'm only talking about the monsters that start off with taunts at the start of the battle, which there's only 4 of them. Armor Claw, Urger, Unspeakable, and Brutalizer. That's right, I'm not even talking about Daedalus, who has Mega Taunts as a status caster at rank 3. I am talking about the 4 monsters that have taunts at rank 0. So with that being said, let's get right into it. I want to start off by giving a huge thanks to Liam for letting me use your account to make this video because Liam has all 4 of the monsters. So we're going to start off with the very first monster that was released, Armor Claw. And once again, I am not just talking about tanks, I'm talking about the taunt monsters. So just like we did in the last video, we're going to start off by stats, traits, and relics. So starting things off with power, this monster has 5,720. Of the 4 taunt monsters, this is actually the lowest. The life stat is actually the highest of all the mythic monsters, tied with 3 others, actually also tied with Brutalizer, 62,732. That is the highest life stat, which I have to say for Armor Claw is really impressive considering he was the first monster, one of the first mythics to get released. And then the speech stat, 4576, this is actually tied also with that of Unspeakable. It's not the lowest of the 4 monsters we're reviewing. So overall he has decent stats. I think considering his role as a tank, it's nice that he has a high life stats. But also, he's more of a hybrid really. And with that being said, let's talk traits. So he has the taunt traits, of course. At rank 1 he has hardened. This is good because having hardened is a 20% chance to not get hit with any negative effect. Alright, that's awesome. You want that on your monsters, especially because they are susceptible to the possession, to the stuns, to the freeze, to getting denied, to tortures, right? If we had immunity to torture, that would be phenomenal. But unfortunately, we don't have that, but we have a hardened, so that's a good thing. And then at rank 3, you get a self-stun immunity. That is pretty good, considering there are 3 monsters that have an AoE stun. Tremor, Moonhaze, and Cat UFO. And then we also have 2 other monsters, Vastas and Unspeakable, that can do a single stun. So you're protected from 5 of the monsters. Now, yes, it's not a lot, but it's better than nothing. The bad thing about this, though, is it is a status caster, so it can easily be removed by a monster that removes positive effects, and then you're susceptible to being stunned. And you know what? We'll actually do relics later. I think it's so much easier just to talk stats and traits first. So the next monster we have is Urger. This was the second monster to be released. Actually, it was kind of released at the same time as Armor Claw because this was the maze monster for the very first mythics. So that being said, we have a power of 5775. That is, if Armor Claw is the lowest, this is, I guess, the second lowest or the second highest, however you want to say it. The life stat is 61,828. You see, it's not too far off from Armor Claw, but for this monster, it is once again the second highest, I guess you can say. And in the speed stat, we have 4609. Of the 4 monsters we're reviewing today, this is the fastest of the top monsters. So super fast Urger. In terms of the traits, we have also hardened, so just like Armor Claw, 20% chance to not get hit with negative effects, but at rank 3 you get a damage protection which blocks 50% of incoming damage. This is super valuable, especially for a monster that's supposed to absorb attacks. This means, let's say this monster had 500k life, you would have to deal 1 million damage to knock out this monster unless you get rid of the damage protection. So for a monster that has taunts that is meant to absorb attacks, I think this is a really great rank 3 trait to have. And then we have Unspeakable. Unspeakable has a power of 5896. This is the highest tied with that of Brutalizer. This monster you're going to see is actually, he really wants to be an attacker. He doesn't want to be a taunt monster. The life stat is the lowest of the bunch, 60,320. And the speed stat, as I already mentioned, is tied with that of Armor Claw, 4576. In terms of the traits, you have Taunt, and then you have a permanent immunity to stun. So that just caps on Armor Claw, who has a status caster. But once you take this monster to rank 3, you actually get the Mountain trait, which gives you immunity to stun and freeze. So this monster is unique, and he is the only mythic monster that has the Mountain trait. No other monster, no other mythic monster is both immune to stun and freeze, with the exception of course, Blazzinger, who once you rank him up to rank 3 has the artifact. But in terms of just having Mountain, this is the only monster. There's not even a mythic monster that can do a status caster freeze and a status caster stun. So he's very unique in that regard. However, what I will say about freeze is that the only mythic monster that relies on freeze is Abysmus. So, you know, you're protected from everyone I mentioned with Armor Claw, and then Abysmus on top of that. Abysmus has AoE freeze and single freeze. And so, of course, he doesn't have the hardened like Urger and Armor Claw, so you're susceptible to getting denied. It's pretty much guaranteed. And of course, you're susceptible to all the torture effects, right? There's not that 20% chance to not get hit with the negative effect. But then, to have a permanent immunity to stun and freeze, I feel like I would kind of prefer that, to be honest. And then our final monster is Brutalizer. Now keep in mind, this was the monster that was behind paywall. If you wanted this monster, you would have to purchase the exclusive Golden Pass, which is the more expensive pass. But nonetheless, he is a taunt monster, and as I mentioned, with Unspeakable, he has a high power, 5896. His life stat, also the highest, 62732, tied with that of Armor Claw, and his speed stat, 4488. Of everyone I mentioned, he is the slowest of the bunch. But again, highest power and highest life stat. So even though he's slow, that doesn't matter. He's there to take hits. He's there to dish out damage, not so much to be fast. His trait is Taunt, of course, and you have Tough. Now this is super unique because there are only 3 mythic monsters that have Tough as a trait. Yoroi and Blazinger are the other two. And the thing is that Blazinger actually gets artifact when he ranks up. So it is super unique to have Tough, and this is just a better hardened because it's 35% chance to not get hit with negative effects. So again, what do you prefer? A mountain trait like that Unspeakable has, or a Tough trait where 35% of the time you don't get hit with negative effects? So I kind of prefer that Tough trait, and for that ring 3, you get a 50% damage mirror. It reflects 50% of damage. So if you've ever battled this monster, if you dish out damage, you reflect half of whatever damage you dish out. So, and let's talk about the monster. In my opinion, I think stats-wise, it's obvious. It goes to Brutalizer, highest life, highest power. I mean, it's a no-brainer. In terms of the traits, this one gets a little tricky for me. I like that this monster has Tough. That's unique to him. I love the damage mirror. But I feel that as a monster that has Taunt, I think Erder takes it, having that damage protection, just making it really tough to kill this monster. Unless you can go and remove this positive effect right away, your first attacks are going to be not dealing so much damage. So I would say Erder has the best trait of the top monsters overall, and after Erder I would give it to Brutalizer, and then after Brutalizer, it's pretty much between Unspeakable and Armor Claw, and I mean, to be honest, it goes to Unspeakable. I mean, come on, Armor Claw, Status Caster, really? What's up with that? But he does have that hardened trait, so I'll give him that. But yeah, I think number 1, Erder takes it, followed by Brutalizer. Alright, the next things we're going to talk about, of course, are the relics. Alright, so when it comes to relics, when you have taunt monsters, they're kind of the same in that most of them have an armor or shield, typically an armor. So what can you do with the armor? Let's find out. If we go to all and we sort by diamonds, we're going to focus primarily on diamonds. Well, for one, you have access to Nabotis' armor. After being damaged by a skill, if your life is below 50%, you heal and you get stamina. So you don't really have to worry about stamina so much. You can also wear the Morg's armor, which gives you a shield at the start of battle, and you reflect damage up to 3 times every time you're attacked. So those two are pretty useful. There's also the Thetis' armor as well, which can serve almost like an oblation drop, draining enemy stamina if your HP is low enough, or if your stamina is low enough. So you have a few options in terms of the armor. And now, armor is the only one of the bunch that can hold the mask. So with the mask, you have a couple options as well. So for one, you can do the Jastar's mask. This, when you attack the enemy, if they have above 75%, you drain stamina. So essentially, your monster turns into a stamina drainer. You can give everyone an extra shield. If you control, there's certain effects that activate with the Watt's mask. You know, it really depends on what you have. Iltron's mask, after being damaged by a skill, you remove stamina from the attacker, and it gives you a shield. So armor is unique in that he can hold the mask relic. And then we have Erder. Erder can also hold the armor relic, so same as Armor Claw, but what's unique about this monster is the ability to hold the shield relic. So let's talk about those. Sort by diamonds, and of course, you have this shield right here. After being damaged by a skill, whoever's life is below 75%, remove stamina from the attacker, and you get an armor up to 2 uses. That's really good. Tenacity, if you want to give everyone some shield points. Fullman shield, when the turn starts, if any ally is under control status effects, you give armor to those targets. So if you get hit with an AoE possession or stun or whatever it may be, your whole team can get some sort of shield. And if you receive damage, you get a shield and you reflect earth. So pretty good, right? Especially that first shield I talked about that can serve as a stamina draining relic. And now we go to the most unique of the bunch. This monster does not hold the armor, does not hold the shield. Instead, this monster, I told you he's a wannabe attacker, he can hold a sword and a trap. So let's start with the sword relic. Okay, the sword relic is interesting. So, of course, sword relics typically deal damage. You have Jakugan sword, you have Cane sword. The cool thing about these swords are, not only do they deal up to 24k damage when they're fully maxed out, Cane sword in particular can actually heal you. So, considering you're a taunt monster that's absorbing attacks, it's nice to have a sword relic that can actually heal you. Or, you can kind of go with the laser beam sword, which will actually make you even stronger. After damaging with the skill, deals some, again, up to 24k points of damage if both uses trigger. But when the charge starts, it also increases your power by over 5,000 points. So it can make you even stronger. Okay, so those are the options for Unspeakable for the sword. And of course, you can also do the trap, so everyone is super familiar with the Oblation trap. If your life is below 50%, all the enemies lose stamina. Now, if we're talking diamond relics, you have access to a better version, the Nabuline trap, in which they just remove even more stamina. So it's a great way, considering you're going to be taking damage, it's a great way. Maybe do a cane sword and a Nabuline trap, and you drain enemy stamina and you're able to heal. So very unique. He is the most unique with his relic slots. And then we have Brutalizer, another unique monster because he can hold 2 armor relics. Not 1, he can hold 2. He's one of the few monsters that can hold 2 of the same relic. So, when it comes to saying who can hold the best relic slots, I don't really know if I'm qualified to answer that because I think every single relic slot is unique to the monster in the sense that, again, Unspeakable, he's a taunt monster and he's not really tanking with his relics, but then he's stamina draining and he can recover life, so that helps to him particular. This Brutalizer just makes him tankier, so Erdr with the armor and shield is being a substitute for like the armor, and then Armclaw being able to wear the mask, so it really just depends on what you're after. If I had to choose one, you know, I really like I actually really like the sword and trap just for being able to heal with a cane sword, but this also depends on what's going to be released in the future, so I'm actually not going to go ahead and pick one. I think it just really depends on the situation. And with that said, we can start talking about skills. So of course we're going to start off with Armor Claw, and one of the most unique things about Armor Claw is the fact that he has a light-based attack as a fire monster. So he can deal some serious damage against dark monsters and nature monsters. And so you have to think about what monsters are players typically going to have ranked up. If we think about the dark monsters, Muchi's a monster that players have ranked up, Nightingale, Miseris for sure since he was a team race monster, and Brutalizer since he was the exclusive Golden Pass monster. So those are 4 monsters right there for sure you're going to be running into ranked up, and especially that Miseris and Brutalizer. In terms of the nature monsters, the best nature monster that comes to mind is probably Nor, right? Also a team race monster, so you can easily take on those monsters because you have elemental advantage. But speaking about Save Rossi God in particular, this skill applies Sunburn to all enemies, which reduces their accuracy by 15%, but it also restores every single cooldown on itself. So any skill that was CDA'd, it no longer has cooldown, so you're able to use whatever skill. Usually I tend to use Save Rossi God as a skill that I just spam over and over and over again, and it gets the job done. So that's awesome, that's unique. We have Monster Review. This skill increases your max life by 50%. Funny thing about this skill, as of time recording this video, for whatever reason the enemy can't remove this max life increase. I'm pretty sure you are supposed to be able to remove it with the positive effect removal, but as of right now it is not being removed. I thought I should mention that, but overall it's just a 50% max life increase. So it's a taunt monster as a monster that's there to absorb attacks. That's pretty useful. You have Dream Big, and I like this skill because only this monster and Brutalizer have Skill Mirror. So Erdr and Unspeakable, they cannot apply Skill Mirror. So the cool thing about this is that even if you're slow, you literally just apply that Skill Mirror. If the enemy can't remove it, they have to think twice before doing a single target or an AoE, because your monster is going to be reflecting that attack back at the enemy. So having Skill Mirror is very nice. It's also a way, if you were to get trade disabled and lose your taunt, it's a great way to reinstate that taunt, at least until you get your taunt back. We have Remember to Subscribe. Another unique thing about this monster is that, for whatever reason, I feel like Social Point, when they release the monsters, the default skills, they're like, oh, who cares about these skills? They tended to give them 0 cooldown, 0 stamina. They turned out to be very powerful skills. In Armor Claw's particular case, he has a heavy fire damage, 0 cooldown, 0 stamina skill. Which means if you're ever stamina drained, and we live in a world where relics can completely drain your stamina, you have a skill you can use. If you ever got hit with CDA, and we live in a world where a lot of players have Saya Miss and Gaidaigo, because Golden Pass monster and Team Race monster, even if you get hit with CDA, you have a skill you can use. So you never have to worry about stamina, and you never have to worry about CDA, thanks to the skill, and it also applies adults on top of dealing heavy fire damage. So that is very awesome. The other skills we have are Pursue Your Passion. This applies a damage boost and heals by 30%. It's worth mentioning because you're a taunt monster, and you can apply Skill Mirror. So again, because you're a taunt monster, you're absorbing attacks, so it's nice to have a healing skill. Now 30% is not significant, but because you have Skill Mirror, I have been able to pull off combos where I Skill Mirror one turn, and then I go for a heal, which turns into 60% heal. So that is useful. This skill applies Ignite, so this monster can do Burning, you can do Sunburn, and you can do Ignite. This is heavy fire damage, don't really use it too much. You also have an AoE Burning skill, and then you have a 0 cooldown special base, which isn't anything too amazing to talk about. So when I look at Armor's skill set, he's really of a blend between an attacker and a tank. He has tanking skills, right? He has a healing skill, he can reapply the taunts, he can skill mirror, but he doesn't have a lot, and he has that 50% max life increase, but he doesn't have enough to be like a full tank. And then he has a lot of damage output skills, right? He has 2 AoEs, he has the ignite, he has the burn, so he likes to apply dots while also tanking a bit. Now let's go on to review Urder. Alright, so to start things out, we have Mount goes first, which deals heavy physical damage to one enemy, applies bleed to one enemy, and 25% life shield to itself. So already we're starting things off with more tankiness. Not only does this monster deal heavy physical damage, you also get an immediate 25% life shield the minute you attack, and you apply bleed to the enemy monster, which reduces the damage output of that monster by 20%. You have Hand of God, a 0 cooldown skill, so even this monster is not susceptible to CDA. The issue here is the stamina cost. We have a 50 stamina cost for heavy thunder damage. Once again, Armor Claw is 0 stamina for heavy fire damage, and it is burning over shock. Now the shock can stop the extra turners. If you ever faced a Nor and the shock landed, that would be awesome. We have Holy Aura, which applies a 50% life shield to itself and blocks 50% of damage received. Keep in mind, this monster already at the start of the battle has the damage protection. You can reinstate that damage protection on 2-turn cooldown, and you give yourself a medium life shield. You know how hard it is to kill this monster? You give that life shield and you're taking half of the damage? So think of it this way, if this monster, we'll do 1,000,000. If you had to dish out 1,000,000 damage to kill this monster, the damage protection makes it so you have to deal out 2,000,000 damage. And then the 50% life shield on itself, well, if your HP is 1,000,000, now you have an extra 500k shield. My goodness, you have to deal out 2.5 million damage to kill this monster when you activate Holy Aura. And again, on 2-turn cooldown, that is awesome. You also have Beast Slayer. This blocks all damage except the special elements, and you give yourself 1 extra immediate turn. Now the bad thing about this skill is the hefty 90 stamina cost. That is a lot of stamina. But Legendary Phobic Shield, when you look at all the mythic monsters, a lot of them don't really have legendary based attacks. They typically tend to be elemental. Again, you saw Armor Claw, he did have like that AoE, but it was very weak. So a lot of them tend to be elemental or physical. So the fact that you only take damage from the special element, that is very nice. You can use that in your extra turn, set up Holy Aura, and now the opponents are limited with what they can do. Now, of course, this could all be removed, but as you can see, Urder is really more of the tank of the group. This monster can absorb attacks and tank a lot. Retribution applies double damage and damage mirror to itself, 100% damage mirror, so whatever damage you receive, you reflect in its entirety. Lance Thrust applies bleed to enemies, once again going after that damage output on the enemy, reducing it by 20%. You have yourself an AoE Shock, and you have another 0 cooldown 50 damage skill, except this is moderate physical damage, but this is an AoE skill. So Urder, in terms of tanking, as you can see, that's what the monster prioritizes it. You want to tank, you want to make it so hard for the enemy to kill your monster to keep your allies alive. And then we have Unspeakable. Now, Unspeakable, I want to start off with Unbreakable, because just like Armor Claw, this monster is unique in the fact that it has another type of elemental attack. In this case, it has Earth. So now you have an elemental advantage against Thunder monsters. So off the top of my head, Siamese comes to mind, right? Now, the bad thing is that this does have 2-turn cooldown, but yes, this monster has light-based attacks and Earth-based attacks. So we'll come back to Unbreakable. But yeah, we have Hide and Seek. This is a special-based attack, and it has 0 cooldown, 45 stamina with a Quicksand. But again, Armor Claw, 0 stamina cost. Alright, we have the Unbreakable. I like this because not only is it heavy earth damage, it also plays life regen. So again, going to his tankiness, something to recover his life. We have 10 million degrees, deals heavy light damage, applies Quicksand and Sunburn. So Unbreakable is a lot stronger, very heavy earth, whereas this is heavy light. But this one applies 2 dots, Quicksand and Sunburn. Very nice dots to apply on the enemy. So even if the attack itself doesn't kill, maybe the status effects will. We also have an AoE Quicksand, mod special damage and Quicksand to all the enemy monsters. This monster is very unique in that he has a stun skill. He is the only Taunt monster that has a deny skill by single stun. You never know when that can come in handy, and you stun the enemy you need to stun and you're good to go. And again, I already mentioned there's not that many monsters that can stun. We have our 3 AoE stunners who I mentioned when I was talking about Armor Claw. And then in terms of single stunners, we have Vastas and Unspeakable. So it's nice to have a Taunt monster that can single stun. We have also a very unique thing about this monster is that he can apply stun here, although I've never really seen this used. Also has such a high stamina cost, I don't think it's really worth it unless you can play it out in the team. We have this skill that applies double damage and sunburn to itself. Definitely not worth it. And then we have another physical 0 cooldown skill, but also not worth it in my opinion. So like I said, Unspeakable is interesting, and we saw it for the relics. He's the monster that doesn't want to be a taunt monster. He wants to be an attacker. We see it from the skills. So very interesting taunt monster for sure. And then we have the beast himself, Brutalizer, and starting things off with Amber Overdose. Once again, we see that 0 damage, 0 cooldown skill, very nice, physical based. It doesn't apply a dot like the other monsters, but it's very nice that you don't have to worry about CD8 and you don't have to worry about stamina draining. We have Merciless Cyclone, deals heavy dark damage to all enemies and applies nightmares. This is actually unique in that I went through all of the monsters in Monster Legends, all of the mythic monsters. Not a lot of them have 45 damage AoE skills. This is a 45 damage one. I would say maybe less than 5 monsters, 5 attackers have a skill that can do 45 AoE, so that is impressive. Oh, and by the way, he's a dark monster. So, again, I'm not talking about Daedalus in this video, but Daedalus is the Earth Megaton monster. It starts taking off with Megatons, so the fact that you have an elemental advantage against Daedalus, I mean, 100% of the time you are killing that Daedalus every single time, thanks to Merciless Cyclone. Aside from that, you also have Double Smash, deals massive dark damage to an enemy. Not a lot of monsters have that massive dark damage output, or massive damage output in general, especially on a 1-turn cooldown. We've been seeing like 50 stamina, 2-turn cooldown. I mean, which is unspeakable, right, with his Unbreakable skill. So, this is also very amazing as well. We have Thorn Guard, increases max life by 50%, similar to that of Armor Claw, but this monster applies Damage Mirror, and again, he also starts the game off with Damage Mirror. So it's nice that if you think about hurting this monster, unless you get rid of the Damage Mirror, he's gonna hurt you back. And so this skill increases your max life, and now it becomes 100% damage mirror. So you really got to be careful with attacking Brutalizer, right? You also have full counter, so again, just like Armor Claw, you can actually apply Taunt and Skill Mirror, so it's very nice that if you want to, you can literally stand there, tank attacks, and then just reflect whatever gets thrown at you. That is very nice. You have a skill that gives you a damage boost and also deals damage. You have a double damage regen skill, really doesn't get used, and you have a 0 cooldown dark attack. To be honest, this monster is an attacker more so than he is a taunt, but he's also really good at taunting thanks to the fact that he can damage mirror, or that he has damage mirror at the start. But yeah, the damage output we see on this monster is insane. Again, he had the highest power, tied with the highest power with Unspeakable, but he definitely does the damage output a lot better, having that Amber Overdose, that 45 dark based AoE, and a massive dark attack. But with all that being said, if we are talking about taunt monsters and what their purpose of the game is, and that is to use them to absorb attacks and to taunt, the #1 clear winner has to be Erder. I think Erder just takes it undoubtedly. We saw the skills, they're definitely geared for staying alive, and it is really hard to take down this monster if you can't get rid of those effects, especially Holy Aura on the 2-turn cooldown. This is a hard monster to take down 100%. Now the thing about the monsters is that there's a lot of ways you can ruin them, right? So my #2 is going to be Brutalizer. If I had to categorize them, Brutalizer is #2 in terms of the skill set. When compared to Armor Claw and Unspeakable, I would say Brutalizer definitely takes it. And then in #3 is my buddy Armor Claw. And again, I love that Armor Claw has the light-based attack, so he has the elemental advantages to all of those dark meta monsters, including Brutalizer, and he's pretty good at taunting as well, but just not as good as Erder or Brutalizer. And of course, in last place is Unspeakable, and that's really because this monster is more geared of being an attacker. So the hard thing about even categorizing monsters in terms of who's best, who's worst, is that it really depends on what you're after. Some players want an attacker taunt monster, some players want more of a tanky taunt monster, so it really depends what you're after. I think actually Erder, going back to Erder offers actually a pretty nice blend, because even though you have those more supportive skills, supportive tank skills, you can also dish out a good amount of damage output with these skills right here. Now the biggest thing you have to worry about is the stamina drain. That's where Brutalizer and Armor Claw really shine, so a lot of it is also situational to that effect. And then the last and final thing we have to talk about are the ultimates. So starting things off with Armor Army, deals heavy social damage to enemies, applies Ignite to enemies, and a 50% life shield. It is nice that he is providing the life shield not only to himself, but to his teammates, and an ignition on top of that. Erder has a very interesting skill in that it is called Stay Safe, but this skill will not leave the enemy safe. It applies Pierce to itself, deals heavy thunder damage to all enemies, applies total damage reduction, and then life regen to our allies. I mean, this is mind-blowing. This is the first Mythic to have Pierce in the form of an ult. Literally doesn't matter what the enemy has, skill mirror, damage mirror, whether they have evasion, you are going to penetrate through that, attack everyone. If anyone's alive, they have total damage reduction, so any attackers are not going to be able to kill you. And on top of that, you also get life regen for all of your monsters. This is great. Unspeakable deals very heavy light damage to all the enemies and applies stun to the enemies and then stun hater to itself. I mean, this is an AoE stun, so to have a taunt monster that can apply denial for an alt is pretty nice. This could have potentially changed the course of the game. So I will also give a shout out to Unspeakable having this AoE stun skill for the alt. And then we have Brutalizer with Brutal Storm, which deals massive dark damage to enemies and applies a 3-turn death countdown. I feel like that 3-turn death countdown is irrelevant because the massive dark damage, that is going to be what's killing the enemy. For sure, like 100% of the time. So, if I had to say who was number 1 in terms of alts, I'm going to give it once again to Erder. I think the Pierce mechanic, being able to deal heavy thunder damage and life regen and total damage reduction, that just does too much. That is phenomenal. Next, I would actually go ahead and give it to Unspeakable because of the fact that it is an AoE stun. And to be honest, it could have been Unspeakable or it could have been Brutalizer because of massive dark damage. But again, if the enemy for whatever reason doesn't die, it's better that you immobilize. Whereas this is massive dark damage, so most of the time they will die. But if for some reason, I'd rather have them stunned. And then last place would have to be Armor Claw, unfortunately. I would say it's nice that he gives a 50% life shield, but I mean, heavy special damage, it's nothing too great, and Ignite is nothing too great. I'd rather go for that massive dark damage. I'd rather go for that Pierce, total damage reduction, life regen. You know, I'd rather AoE stun. And so that being said, we have gone over the stats, the traits, the relics, the skills, the alts of the monsters. If I had to pick a number 1 taunt monster, like who is the best taunt monster, who is the monster you put with your dodge area monsters, it has to go to Erder. I would say Erder takes the first spot. Brutalizer takes spot number 2. Armor Claw, I would say, takes spot number 3, and then spot number 4 goes to Unspeakable. But at the same time, I should mention, they're all pretty unique, especially Unspeakable, probably the most unique of the bunch. They're all pretty unique that you really can't go wrong with one or the other. Again, it depends on the situation. Brutalizer, you can kind of even up him for the fact that you can take on Daedalus super easily. Even if Daedalus is ranked up and your Brutalizer isn't like fully ranked, just having that 45 damage dark-based AoE, that gives you an advantage. So even though I'm ranking the monsters just amongst themselves, when you consider the meta, you know, a lot of things can change. Because if you're fighting a Miserous Nightingale combo, for example, Brutalizer would be the worst monster to bring. And in fact, you're better off with Unspeakable or probably Armor Claw with that Save Rossi God skill. So it just really depends on the situation. And if you're going after an attacker, you're not going to be picking Erder. You're going to use Brutalizer. You're going to use Brutalizer 2 Strength. So it just really depends on the situation. But in terms of just the taunt monsters, I would have to say Erder takes it. So, with that being said, guys, that is going to be it for this video on the top Mythics Taunt Edition. Again, not Tank Edition, Taunt Edition. Let me know what you guys thought about it. Let me know if you disagree or agree with anything in particular, the stats, the skills, anything I messed up on. Feel free to let me know in the comments below. And once again, a huge thanks to Liam for letting me use your account to make this video so I could talk about all of the monsters. And with that said, remember to subscribe.